so now let me introduce Mr. Jack Cannon, our guest speaker for the evening. He is with the National Rifle Association. Now, we always think Second Amendment rights, lobbying for gun rights, that sort of thing, but there really is, and I've learned this too, it's just I had no idea that there was so much more to the NRA than that. I mean, that is a big deal. We want to preserve our gun rights, but the NRA has really developed that into a science and has so many other facets that all work together towards that goal. So if you will, please welcome Mr. Cannon, and he will give us more information on that.
Good evening, and thank you once again for inviting me here to speak. Those of you that are old enough to remember some of the cartoons we watched, the one with Sherman and Mr. Peabody that had the Wayback Machine, we're going to do Wayback right now. We're going to go back to the olden days in the 1870s. 1870, 5 years after the end of the War of Northern Aggression as we know it. The Civil War, as the Northern Yankees call it. A couple of generals and a couple of colonels were sitting around probably having a cold one and started talking about the atrocious accuracy and ability and shooting ability of the average Northern soldier. One of the comments that came out of the meeting was you could take 100 rebels and outshoot and outfight 500 Yankees. And so they wanted to do something about it. So in 1871, they signed a charter in New York City and started the National Rifle Association to promote the shooting sports. And it was, how many of you ever heard of the Creedmoor Cup? Creedmoor Cup is named after a farm on Long Island, where they initially, a group of American shooters challenged the Irish shooters, which were the best in the world, to a competition, and they went over to Ireland and beat them. Well, the Irish weren't going to let that stand, so they came back over. The Americans set up on the Creedmoor farm, and they had a shooting competition for a real nice cup. They named the cup after the farm, and the Irish took it home. Legitimately. So, this has been going on, the Creedmoor Cup has been going on since the 1880s, and it goes on today. And it's strictly a long-range shooting, no iron sights, a lot of things like F-class and different shooting competitions that arise out of that. Fast forward to the 1920s. They passed a constitutional amendment to outlaw the production. What is interesting is not the sale, they outlawed the production of alcoholic beverages. That worked so well, they decided in the 1930s they were going to do the same thing with firearms. They were going to outlaw all firearms. At that point, the NRA got a political side. They went to fight. And the worst that was ended up being done to the gun owners of the time was if you wanted to buy a fully auto firearm, you had to pay a $200 tax stamp. That was about the equivalent to 6 months' income. They've never changed that rule. In '68, with the Gun Control Act, they came back on the battlefield and fought for it again. I believe it was 1971, they realized this is going to be an ongoing fight, and they started the second portion of the National Rifle Association, the Institute of Legislative Action. So anytime you see the politicians talking about the NRA, they're talking about what we call ILAC, the Institute for Legislative Actions. That's the ones that if somebody in San Angelo gets stupid and starts trying to do an anti-gun deal, they'll get somebody down there in front of the city board and quite literally give it to them. They do it in the nation's capital, do it in state capitals. They're out in California fighting a hard fight out there right now. They now have 3 sections. In 1990, they started talking group of big donors, board members, Wayne LaPierre and others started talking about, they're looking at a room full of people, wondering how much money there was, and what are you doing to secure the future of the Second Amendment? We're fighting for it right now. What are you doing to protect the future of the Second Amendment? Well, they came up with the NRA Foundation. NRA Foundation is a 501c3 charitable organization. We're nonprofit. Depending on which one of the charity rating groups you look at, we're between 92 and 98% of our funds go back. Just depends on what they consider what. But those funds, and that's one of the little handouts you have there, those funds are limited to where we can send them. And they'll go to primarily youth shooting sports, because who is the future of the Second Amendment? I brought this up a lot of times when people give me lip about, well, what's the NRA doing? Why aren't they here? Why aren't they there? You know, well, understand the foundation, that's not our job. That's Isla's job. And I can give you Isla's phone number and you can call them and let them know. What we're looking at is the future, because who do you want voting? The kids that play video games, or the kids that have been involved in Boy Scouts, 4-H, FFA, Junior ROTC, SCTP, half a dozen others that are out there. Women on Target, which is a program for women who have never fired a firearm before to learn how to shoot a gun. And I always jokingly say in a non-testosterone manner. You've got all different kinds of programs that are out there, and that little sheet just names about 10 of the basic areas that we do. The funds that we raise are raised through Friends of NRA. We've got a Friends of NRA banquet coming up here in town on Friday. Would love to have y'all come. Tickets available online at friendsofnra.org. I want to bring up one program that's come up. One of the things that has seemed to just cover up the news nowadays are the school shootings. And people have started asking, what's the NRA doing about it? Well, in 2011, they started doing something about it. Asa Hutchins, former governor of Arkansas, headed it up. They had school administrators, they had teachers, they had police officers, they had all the different parts of the scholastic world paying attention and putting their input in. And what they came up with is National School Shield. This is an overview that they did for us back in December, and I've been using it pretty much unedited. So this is exactly the way that I saw it here. Just an overview. In December of 2012, it's introduced as a new initiative. In April 2013, the task force issued an official report documenting a clear need to address school violence and recommendations on the best practices in school safety and security. And the mission is very simple: to protect our most precious resource, our children. Engage communities and empower the leaders to help make our schools more secure. Now I'm going to ask you something. Does anything in there say we put guns in schools?
No.
The last one in there, the best practices in school safety and security. That's what this program is all about. 4 areas: awareness, education, advocacy, and grant funding. So, first one is preparedness. You have prevention. What's the best way for the school district to prevent violence on their school property? Detect. In short, pay attention to what's going on. Detect the problem before it manifests itself. Delay. The old expression, talk them down off the edge. Talk to the student, talk to the person, talk to the parent, whoever it is that's the potential problem. Respond to the problem. Don't just hide it. We've seen that in some of the recent shootings, that there have been people saying, well, we were going to tell somebody, but we didn't. And recover. In other words, not just recover after something has happened, but recover after you respond and go through things the right way. for the resources that are available, there's an online security optional is to go to the school security assessment with an NSS assessor. We have law enforcement agents throughout the country, always getting more, that have been trained to go onto a school campus during normal class times, and assess the security and safety of that school. What's the flow? When the kids come out of the classroom, where do they go? Where do they hang out? Where do they go to hide? We all did it when we were in high school. We all had those little places we could sneak off. The big bad thing might have been smoke a cigarette or something like this. Visit the Resource Center for guidance on the best practices. And remember, these are put together by people that are involved in day-to-day schools. Request grant funding to improve school safety. Online self-assessment is not meant to, it's not a pat on the back, it's not a feel-good thing. It's meant for you to assess the safety and security of your school. Assist schools in recognizing strengths and in identifying areas for future review. Features modules focused on various topics like preparedness, prevention, mitigation, and recovery. Complements the National School Shield self-assessment tool is the security assessor training. This is when someone physically comes to the school. I know I'm driving the lady here with the camera nuts because I keep... Vulnerability assessment. Facilities, maximize local resources, because it's not just the school. You also have to make sure the local police are aware of what's going on, and if something starts to happen on campus, you've got to make sure there's a way for the school, for the law enforcement to be able to respond. Online Resource Center. Again, I point out news and information, but best practices, tools, and resources. Training and education. This is for your teachers, administrators, law enforcement, community engagement. Of course, donations and grant funding, that comes back to Friends of NRA. This program is nearly fully funded strictly by grants given to it by the 52 field reps in their territories and grants every year. The grant program is managed and fulfilled through the NRA Foundation. The first year they awarded 5 grants totaling $200,000. It's an average of about $40,000 apiece. Now you think that might not be very much. If you look at, for example, San Angelo School District and the many campuses they have, but you know, for $40,000, you could probably put some cameras up in some schools that don't have it. You could set up a central location for people to be watching those cameras and making sure something's not going on. All grant recipients indicated that they felt that the grants allow them to prioritize safety and security projects they may not have been able to do on their own. Grant-funded activities included perimeter fencing. I've got to tell you one that I found really funny, in a sad way, but still funny. One of the first schools that they did the assessment on, they had doors similar to what we have here in the back of this room. But it was the old-fashioned doors. They still had a handle on the outside. So they needed to secure those. So they wrapped chain around the door handles and padlocked it. When the assessor came back the second time through, he said, what are you going to do if there's a fire? Well, we'll unlock it. Well, if you've got 200 kids from here to that door, how are you going to get the key there? Wow, you know, light bulb went off. So they went out and built a chain link fence, made a little square, about 10 feet outside the door. And the assessment actually says to the school board, all you did was move the bodies 10 feet. So there's a right way to fix it, a wrong way to fix it, and that way to fix it. More information, you can just go to nationalschoolshield.org, access the latest information, request program updates. Got their phone number there, it's on the flyer that I handed out to you. You can also send them an email there at info@nationalschoolshield.org. That's just one of the newer programs that we do. And I'll kind of throw the floor open here a little bit and see if there's anybody got any questions regarding School Shield or any of the programs or Friends of NRA or whatever. Yes, sir.
How many schools actually request you come and give them an assessment?
The question, in case you didn't hear it, was how many schools actually request. Right now, not as many as we'd like to see. We're doing a slow rollout. They just came into Texas this year. First schools were down in the Houston area. I've got some interest from, believe it or not, Big Spring Independent School District. The school board up there just passed to allow concealed carry on campus. So they've got a lot of interest in that. Of course, nothing can be done right now because they're not in school. But if they want to do the assessment, they can call this number, get in touch with Sheila or whoever up there, and arrange, schedule an appointment to have the assessors come in. They will be doing assessor instructing classes as well. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What if you don't get a request from the school district? Can anything be done because the citizens would like to have this?
I'm going to say odds are probably not. You're going to have to get your school system involved. Before I went to work for the NRA, I worked for Beretta, and I had Indiana and Ohio. And I lived in a county that I refer to as the People's Democratic Republic of Monroe County. That was otherwise known as Bloomington, Indiana, the home of Indiana University. They can play basketball. What was it? There was a t-shirt running around in town that said a drinking town with a football problem. To give you an idea. But a friend of mine had been trying to get one of the other programs we support through Friends called Eddie Eagle. It's not pro-gun or anti-gun, it's a simple gun safety program, but it's geared towards pre-K through third graders. We've had almost 30 million kids have been through that program since we started. But when she would start talking about it, they would get the school board and the town fathers, for lack of a better term, would start asking questions. They were very interested in it until they found out that it was from the NRA. Then they shut it off. They didn't want to have an NRA in their schools, even though it's probably one of the best forms of safety training for little kids that there is. So it's an effort, going back to your question, and to your question, it's an effort going back to the school boards and the citizens of the towns, hammering them that this is out there and this is available. Yes, sir.
That's why I asked the question, because our local school board is paying someone to do an assessment
Exactly.
when they could get it for free.
Well, ours isn't free, but it's not terribly expensive. I think it varies between $500 and $750 for them to do it.
I'm sure they're spending more than that because they look.
If it's our school district, you can bet on it.
No comment. Is anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Not quite a question, but just a statement. The recent ad that NRA has on TV with the gentleman who intervened on the church shooting in South Texas, best ad I've ever seen.
What?
Best ad I've ever seen.
I got to meet him at the annual meeting this year. I mean, it was just Jack, this is, and back like that, but I got to meet him. You know what? He could have been sitting in this room right here. He just somebody that happened to be outside and heard the gunshots and responded. Somebody else have a question?
What about churches?
His question was, what about churches? And I think it's a good question. Right now, I don't know that this is set up. We're mainly hitting the schools. But my counterpart, what we call Area 1, which is Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, he's retired law enforcement, and they have half a dozen people that go to their church that are retired law enforcement. And they actually they've made their own program. And there are Sundays where after church, they do practice scenarios and things like this. And if you have a group of people know, for example, if this was an after-church meeting, there would be at least one or two of them in the church, if not in the room proper where the meeting was taking place, just in case somebody decides to pick that church out that weekend. But as of right now, there's probably things that School Shield could do for churches, but I don't know that we're not set up because we haven't gotten into all 50 states yet. But I can see that as a possibility down the road, is that School Shield, you know, is opened up to more than just the schools. Anybody else? Questions? About any of the other programs that we have? Yes, sir.
A different subject. Our governor seems to like this red flag thing on gun control. Any views on that? How is the NRA fighting that?
That's an ILA question, and I'm on the third prong of the fork. I actually work for what they call general operations. I am on loan to the NRA Foundation. So 99.9% of what I do is NRA Foundation. You can actually contact grassroots, ILAs, what they call grassroots, and ask them that question, and you'll get a gentleman named Glenn Caroline is probably your best chance to email him, gcaroline@nrahq.org. I know whenever something pops up that I don't have an answer, I shoot him an email, and usually within a day or so, if he's not traveling, he's answering the question. Anybody else? Well, once again, I will invite y'all to the Friends of NRA banquet this Friday. It's down at the Fort Concho Stables. Doors open 5:30. Got a prime rib dinner that Kenny Blankett's fixing. We've got all kinds of firearms and other goodies there for you to win on raffles or auctions. A concealed carry purse, for example, is one of them. We have a growler. That one little kid told her mother that this would be perfect for her to carry her milk in.
No.
Young lady, wait a few years and you'll know better.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You know, our news media, you're well aware of them guys, right?
Why do you think I'm here today?
Yeah, they're constantly, every time they school shootings, the gun is an AR-15 or some kind of look like an assault weapon. They're always saying it's an automatic. Well, it's not fully automatic, it's a semi-automatic. Now, how do you get it across, you understand?
What his question is when a newscaster gets up, they're always talking about a fully automatic semi-auto. And how do you get that across to them? Ron White has a great line. You can fix ignorance. You can't fix stupidity. And stupidity is intentionally keeping yourself ignorant. And that's exactly what they've got. They're reading a teleprompter. They're reading it right off there. There may be heartfelt feelings involved with this, but they're not necessarily correct. And so that's a challenge for everybody. And one of the things all the field reps like myself do, we want to talk to different groups. Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, Tea Party, anybody that will let us come in and talk to you about what it is we do. Let me ask you, how many of you even knew there was an NRA Foundation? How many of you knew that there was a National School Shield? That is nearly 5 years old, over 5 years old. It goes back to your statement. If they won't say it, that's what they have. That's what they pay me for, is to come out and say it. Yes, sir.
Have any of the schools that have had shootings gone into this program?
As far as I'm aware of, none that had it before. I believe they have had a couple of contacts afterwards. I don't know that they've finished the whole process yet. I believe there have been some that have contacted them after the fact. either somebody that was a teacher or parent or whatever, do you know about?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Churches, in the past, or at least I've been hearing that, is it a law that they can't have guns in church, or is that just their prerogative, or?
My understanding is that's based upon the state and the church. That's just like we have our 30-06 and 30-07 laws, regulations. Building can be posted for one or both.
Pastor's decision.
Excuse me?
The pastor's decision.
Usually it's up to the, I call it the church board, because seems like every religion has a different terminology for it.
Well, as you well know, churches in general don't get political. They're scared to death they're going to get fined or sent off to jail for mentioning something conservative. And the thing that I'm wondering about is are there more churches now since this thing down in Texas? What was that?
Sutherland Springs.
Have they woke up a lot of other churches and trying to defend themselves?
I would imagine most churches, at least in the state of Texas, there's at least 2 or 3 people carrying concealed in the church. Whether there's an organized program, don't know. Don't know.
I asked our pastor about it. He said, please do.
That's what most of them say.
Yeah.
We had a pastor who was receiving threats. He called the FBI and they said, arm your congregation, find some people in your congregation, have them armed. And he's armed, so is his daughter-in-law. And those are only 2 that I know of. There are a lot more.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What, if you were to go into a church, what kind of program would you present in church, to a church group? Would it depend on the age group of the members, or how would you go about that?
Probably your best bet for now would be to go to your local law enforcement and look at what suggestions that they could give you as a congregation, because a lot of it depends on the layout of the church, potential areas. Everything that School Shield talks about with schools can be talked about with churches. So, the security of the property, the access, the egress, entrances, it's not just going to happen when you're sitting there listening to the preacher. It could happen during, at any time that there's a group there. What was it? One of the biggest bombings back in the 60s was blowing up the church with a bunch of school kids in there having a meeting. That was when bombing schools was the big thing. Now it's shoot them up. It's easier to get firearms than it is to get dynamite, I guess. I don't know. But, that would be my thought process for my church. Yes, sir.
Did the NRA give any input to Governor Abbott when he gathered?
I know that they had people down there. I don't know the amount of it. And then remember, too, we have a very strong state affiliate here, the Texas State Rifle Association. And I just forgot her name, but our lobbyist down there is a power, Alice Tripp, is a power to be reckoned with if you're a senator, congressman, or an aide, or anything associated with the state capitol down there. She is a power to be reckoned with. So,
It's good.
it's kind of nice. I know a lot of states don't have that good a group to help them out. Anybody else? Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody for inviting me and having me here today. I hope you picked up something. I hope you like it. I hope to see you Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Cannon. That was some good information. I wish that some of our school board members had been here. They weren't able to come, but we need to get this information to them, and we need to really encourage them to look into this further. So, we have a special guest in the house, and Senator Perry, would you like to come up and kind of give us an update here?
Well, this wasn't planned, and I always am trying to find a way to get back to places, and so it just worked out convenient. I've been here all day. It's been a great day. I found out you guys are meeting, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. This is timely. School shield's one component. I mean, there's no silver bullet to fix the problems. We can all talk about the roots and the symptoms. You know, it's a lost society. It's broken families. It's how it manifests itself. We're told it's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. But so a couple of things that I can tell you what the state's looking at. Obviously, there's been a couple of questions on Governor Abbott's plan and direct flag. So I caution and I encourage you guys that it's a working process. That's the first round. I hope, and I'm going to always give deference, that was not intended to be the product in its final form at any stretch. There's a lot of heartburn and concern in that document regarding due process. Alex Tripp was in the last meeting. There was a meeting about gun rights issues in the last session of the 3-day session. It's pretty short, but Alex Tripp was to the right of the governor, and the other side of gun rights activists, those that would probably think that red flag doesn't go far enough, were opposite. And there was a pretty healthy debate banner for a few minutes. Not a lot of minutes when taken in total context of the 3-day meetings, but I can tell you that there are people that understand liberty, that understand Second Amendment, that also would not want to see another shooting in a school if at all possible. So there's no bad guys in this. And I already saw the battle lines drawn, and you know, proverbial, pardon the pun, but the guns were already out. This is, well, we can't have that attitude. We have a problem. We need to find a solution, but we cannot sacrifice our individual liberties in that process. I have all the confidence in our legislatures that get that you will have a loud and constant beat of the drum to prohibit taking away the right and securing another right. You never win in that. It's you know, it's like kissing your cousin. Nothing really changed, and danger still exists. So I get your concerns, and I think it's valid in its current form. Due process cannot be on the back end. If you're going to take something away from me, you better have a due process on the front end. Those are the debates of the day that we'll have regarding that plan. In general, the plan had a lot of good ideas. I'll let you in on a couple of things that I've been actively involved in. Before it was, everybody's heard of Twitter. Twitter, not the Twitter account that you see our president using, but Texas Tech about 4 years ago, under Governor Perry's direction on his final session leaving the Capitol, he was engaged for Texas Tech Health Science Center on a project, a pilot. He funded it, I believe, $600,000 to give it a test. And then he left, and we have 4 years of data to support it. So what the program is, it's an acronym for Twitter. It's telemedicine, wellness, intervention, triage, and referral. TWITR. So the unique thing about it is, to our knowledge, nobody's got any of this other technology working. Everybody says, go look at social media. You can watch social media and determine what a kid's going to do next. That's just not true. There's too many social medias, too many venues, too many problems with that. It's a part of it, but not. But what Twitter set out to do was to be a predictor. Let's effectively, and here's statutory language that need to be drafted. You've got parental rights and issues like that. But at the same time, what we took out, or what the program did and what Tech did, is set out a pilot project that included 42,000 kids in rural West Texas. This is a rural answer, because a lot of the urban districts have the resources to have psychologists and stuff. So they had 42,000 kids over the last 4 years. Of that, they were able to carve out 400 kids that potentially showed problems, that needed some kind of interaction, if you will, with the parents and the system. Out of those 400, they were able to cull 25 kids out of the classroom. 2 of those were within hours of having a shootout at the school. One of them was actually at the school, I'm told. Another, I believe, 40 kids or so were pulled into alternative schools, and another 40 were pretty much completely removed from the schools. So out of 42,000 kids, it was able to discern through the process kids that potentially showed the problem. It's a triage program. Once you identify, you do the mental health assessment, you intervene, you do a triage, and you refer. So it's really shows a lot of promise, and it has data to support its effectiveness. Because what we can do all day is we can harden our assets. We can arm our resources inside those walls. But our best predictor, our best defense is if we can ever prevent it from happening. So it's one of those tools that we will find use for in the state that has data to support it that's scalable, specifically for rural West Texas. So some of the things it does differently. It may start seeing that teacher say, you know, Johnny's not quite right. He's acting up, he's acting out, it's uncharacteristic. He's being bullied. You know what bullying is. We've been around bullying all our life. It's a different connotation now, but it's when kids are picking on kids. Kids don't handle things like they used to. So those are kids that would be a possible intervention to say, are you okay? Does your parents know what's going on? Or do we know what's going on? So there's an initiative, an active response to those kids as they start trying to figure out and profiling those kids to figure out the ones that may not be stable or may have the potential to do this. So I'm kind of encouraged by that. It's not going to be the silver bullet. I tell everybody, I would be lying to you if I thought we could prevent the next shooting. There will be another shooting, unfortunately. But if we can prevent one by catching a kid that had that bent, then we've done our job on some level. So that's some things that are timely and working. I don't want to keep you guys longer. Y'all didn't know I was coming, but at the same time, I don't want to cut you short if you've got questions. It's good to be back. I'm down here quite a bit. It just didn't work out where Tuesdays were the days, so I think I'm trying to catch a packet or a meeting one day on a Wednesday down the road, and I'll let them know ahead of time so maybe have some more time. But it's good to see y'all still here. Yes, sir.
I was curious, of those children that were identified that were going to be potential problems, was there any study done to what their home life and how they were brought up?
So the question is a kid acting out a symptom of a home life broken out? I don't have the specifics on those that were removed from the class or alternatives or out of the classroom activity altogether. I can almost guarantee you that I would assume that that's a part of the problem. But you know, one of these kids was very affluent, very part of the family, and did the shooting the other day. He didn't have an excuse or a stereotype that fit the model that we would say. That said, of this group, I'm sure that there was I call them the socially awkward kids, the kids that don't quite find a home, don't quite fit in, and they see this as an avenue. So it's part of the screening, absolutely. It's part of the process, but I don't have the numbers of those kids that was that way. Others?
Is that Twitter program, is that in the schools?
So here's what it is. I think we had, don't hold me to it, I think there was 8 or 12 districts rurally that signed up for the program. It was offered to them as a free service. It was provided to them as a pilot. $600,000 grant out of the governor's office for 4 years. So now, Governor Abbott, we met, it was timely, I held a meeting with Governor Abbott and his staff and all the stakeholders, DPS, Texas Education Agency personnel, Health and Human Services personnel, because it's mental health issues. I had all of those people in the room back in January. And I said, this is something that we need to very much consider as a part of the piece of the puzzle. And from that, it just kind of mushroomed into the bureaucracy of government to Can we scale it? Is it something we can use? Is it something we really can take statewide? The day of the shooting, Governor Abbott mentioned this program specifically. So there were already things working, Rick, and I had had previous conversations with the governor's office about this particular program in the fall and the previous year. So it's something that's been on the radar. The shooting just moved it to the front and center. My belief is that it will have the potential of expanding the net to catch these kids in trouble more than people know today. Governor Abbott spoke to a $20 million grant to expand that statewide. Now, I don't know that it has application in the big schools. If you've got psychologists on staff, if you've got the communication lines already set, if you've got the monitoring set up, you may not need it. But for rural Texas that don't have the luxury of a school psychologist, it provides part of the process is what we call ride-arounds or circuit riders. These psychologists would go from district to district to district that didn't have them. You'll see an additional funding for school psychologists that education service centers will dispatch to our rural communities that don't have the luxury of having a payroll big enough to manage all of it. So it's comprehensive, it's preventive in nature. We need to harden our assets. We need to defend ourselves at that level. But this hopefully will prevent that coming in. Abbott's made it a priority in his plan. So it's encouraging. Most people don't know those type of things are going on, but and it didn't hurt the fact that it came from my alma mater, so it's not bad. I'll take a question or two on anything you got going on in your mind. Yes, sir.
There's something you or the governor can do to take the Alamo away from Georgia.
I wish. There's not. It's that ship's done some sailed. Sad. In some ways. His question was, can the governor take the Alamo back away from general land office? Now let me give you a little perspective. As Paul Harvey said, there's always two sides of the story. So, setting the political environment that we're in, the Alamo was in desperate need of refurbishment. It literally was crumbling around itself. It had become unsafe and unstable. So there was no argument to be made that it's okay the way it is and we don't need to do something. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas and all of those folks had years to try to maintain and keep it up, and there was just no interest in it. So part of the reason the GLO got that right is because the private sector stepped up and put hundreds of millions of dollars into that project. With that came, it needs to be a bigger, grander, more prominent position. So what they are going to do, I was at a different group this morning. I got to spend 3 days on Gettysburg Battlefield. And based on what I'm understanding, that's what the Alamo will ultimately kind of portray, is they bought up all the private sector businesses in that area, and they're going to recreate that whole entire complex as it originally was. All you get to see when you see the Alamo, that's just the chapel of the bigger fortress. So they're going to literally recreate the original fortress. So as much as some of the things I don't like the way it's going about, the tone, the air, the revisionist history that are being spouted, whether, I don't like that aspect, but long term, you're going to literally have wherever Davy Crockett or Jim Bowie died, where that spot was, you're going to know that's where he was. And right now, that's in the center of a paved street across the street from the bank. So it's going to do a good job, and we'll be proud of it, I think, as Texas goes, and it will give you a historical reference that you can't appreciate until you've seen the magnitude of the complex. So you got to look for that silver lining, that silk purse and sow's ear kind of deal. We're going to get there. I think we'll be okay for it. The revisionist history of it, it's up to people like us to make sure the history gets out. But the actual process and complex, I'm kind of knowing where it was going and knowing where the state was at as far as trying to keep it maintained and the people delegating that responsibility. I'm kind of excited about the prospects of having it recreated. The Battle of Gettysburg and those type of monuments around that are nationally maintained, unbelievable. If you get a chance to walk it and feel it and run up Pickett's Run, when you run up Pickett's Run and you feel that the weight of those You know, you're seeing bullets on the ground, you still can kind of sort through. It's pretty amazing. So I'm excited from that perspective. So it's always a positive if you look for it. Good question. I wasn't expecting that. All right, I won't keep you any longer. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What about the state police law enforcement that's in San Angelo right now?
I'm not familiar. Is there an extra group, or I'm not familiar. Do you,
Yeah, you see a car running through town that says state police on the side of it. We go, what's that?
I assume they're DPS or Texas Ranger certified. I don't know. I mean, I can.
It's not the highway patrol.
Yeah.
It's a white car.
The question was, what are the state police presence in San Angelo area for? And I'm not aware of anything different than DPS or Rangers that would drive those vehicles.
The
So
car says on the side says state law enforcement.
state law enforcement.
And then on the back of the car it says state police.
I don't think they're any different than DPS or probably some branch. I don't know if they have a specific jurisdiction. I really don't know. Yes, sir. Do you know? Do you know it?
Ma'am, for about the last 6 or 8 years, the state has been pulling game wardens from other parts of the state to help bolster the border patrol and the protections, you know, the drug interdiction coming across the border and things like this. It doesn't necessarily mean that the problem is in San Angelo. I can recall going out and seeing half a dozen highway patrolmen staying in a hotel in Fort Stockton. They were patrolling I-10 west. I guarantee you were running 85, 90 miles an hour. You were going to get to meet one of them. But they'll bring game wardens down to support and bolster the mainly drug interdiction and illegal crossings.
It's a great explanation. We have 25 partnering agencies on the border initiative. Game wardens, local county sheriffs, all of those. So I did not know they renamed the car, but that makes sense. Yes, sir.
Senator, do you have anything about property tax reform?
So the question is property tax reform, yes. So property tax, here's the challenges in 19. It will be my first, let me rephrase it, it will be the hardest fiscal budget session we've ever had, including the one in 11 when the housing boom bust. And people laugh when I say that, and it's for all the right reasons. Texas has grown. Our resources are not keeping up with some of the needs. We're going to have a real hard budget session. So budget's going to be a tough discussion. Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick have made priority one, property tax reform. It's going to happen. Conversations we will stay here as many special sessions as it takes to get property tax reform. If you ask me what I think that looks like, my crystal ball is this. You'll get rid of the voter petition. I don't think a voter petition will survive the session. And if it does, we'll stay there till it doesn't. So right now, you have to have a voter petition to challenge your taxing jurisdiction if they go above 8%. That petition requirement, in my mind, is the coup de grace. It's the one thing that's not negotiable next session. So I think you'll see the petition going. The debate of the day will be over what is that rollback rate? Is it the effective rate? Those rates. So you will see a reduction in rollback rate or a similar approach to getting your tax rates capped a little bit without voter approval. I don't know what that number looks like. Last year the Senate was willing to stop at 5. We started at 4. We negotiated 5. The House was at 6 and it died. So, but yes, property tax reform will occur next session.
So are you saying that if the House decides to walk out, that like they did this past time, that the governor will say, no, get your butt back in there and get this situated?
Unless something's changed, and shootings may have changed it, but I don't think on this issue the governor or the lieutenant governor has an appetite for wavering on it. The voters are pretty clear. We are losing our young people in our larger cities because they can't afford to stay there. So if you lose your young people in large cities because they can't afford to live there, and they migrate out, you end up with a Detroit. And so there's bigger public policy decisions and discussions that you as publics don't get to hear because the media is not going to share it. So my observation, and I would be totally shocked if property tax reform does not occur based on the two of the three. The third is yet to be named. Anybody that comes into that position has to understand that this is a non-negotiable. So we'll start somewhere in the middle of that. It's going to happen. Let me catch up. Yes.
We hear that our property taxes continue to go up because of unfunded mandates to the counties.
Okay.
What is the real story on unfunded mandates? Because I have heard that the county's not getting their paperwork in, that's why they're not getting their money, and then I've heard, our paperwork's there, they're just not paying us.
So that's a great question. Unfunded mandates. That's been the counter to property tax reform, i.e. giving the voters a voice. So in my 10 years, when I get through 19 next year, I will be there basically 10 years, 21 next 5. I cannot name an unfunded mandate. They may have been one slip in, but there's a conscious and deliberate effort to not put a burden on a county, because the county is an extension of the state. Cities are their own animals. They can be home rule, they can be general, but they operate independently of state, pretty much. We give a general framework, but we don't have much to do with those dollars. Counties are an extension of state government, so they do have a valid. There's an umbilical cord there. You know, we do have a responsibility to keep the lifeblood flowing. I cannot name a specific unfunded. If I had a county commissioner, he could probably name 5, but I do not know of any that I'm aware of, and if they were unintentional. That said, where they hammer us is indigent defense, which means everybody's got rights to our criminal and civil justice system, regardless of ability to pay. It's the right thing to do. That cost has exponentially increased on our counties. We fund, but we don't fund all of that. But here's a little history, and here's what people ignore. That was out of the 50s and 60s, the 60s, the civil rights era, where the feds came in and made some unfunded mandates. So they put that on the counties. The state started helping with that issue several years back. And in some counties, it's based on formula, it's based on weird stuff, but the state has never been intended to be 100% funder of that issue. It wasn't our problem we created, but we've done some. So the argument is we haven't done enough. And I think that's always the deal. The problem is we've got a criminal justice system that's overrun and overrode with, I'll tell you, next session, 2 things have already come up. Because of Colorado, and I believe New Mexico, and California, legalization of marijuana, they're coming into Texas, it's illegal here, they're clogging up our court systems, they're beginning to be misdemeanors only, because we can't handle them through the court system. They can't fund it, we can't hold them, and we can't process it. So those are real issues. So I'll answer it this way. There's probably improvement on both sides, but to say that that's the reason they can't control their property taxes is just not true. And really, what we need to keep in front of us in this debate is we've never told a taxing jurisdiction you can't get an increase. We just said you've got to ask the voters for it. There's a big difference in the discussion when you say they're capping my revenue, and we say we're just going to stay above this cap. You've got to ask and prove it to the voters. You've got to communicate why you need it. So I take exception to the argument of the day that we're capping their ability to function. No, we're just saying the state managed its budget with less than 3%. We worked hard, and arguably we didn't fund some things that we're probably going to have to deal with next session. But we had a goal to stay at population inflation or under inflation, and we were able to make that work. Counties don't have that mentality, and they haven't. The cost drivers in your county budgets, this is the hard facts. Your indigent defense is a problem. Your indigent health care is a little bit of a problem. The bigger issue is health care cost for your employees. And health care costs for the state employees has been huge. It's unsustainable. So when they look out there across the board and they're looking for a cost of living raise, which is not guaranteed in private sector, they're looking for a really plush benefit package, which is not comparable to the private sector. And then they see 8 to 24% increase in health insurance premiums. I understand why they need more money, but that needs to be a story that's told to the public if they're going to fund it. These are a legitimate discussion. They're not the sole reason. That is not why they can't come to the voters and ask for increases. Most of the time, I believe you trust the voters. If you have your facts right and you present your case right and you tell them that I'm 3 sheriffs short for my population, most people will say hire the 3 sheriffs and if it takes an extra percentage, we will. Here's my challenge. Y'all may have already know this, full disclosure, but I have 51 counties. I have 38 of those counties that are less than 10,000 people. I have counties that where if they raise your value, your 1 cent, if they raise your property taxes 1 cent, they get $20,000. That's their values. They're a very poor county. So if they need to buy a new ambulance and it's $100,000, they can't even get there with 1 cent. That 1 penny in Harris County, Houston, Texas, may get them several million, if not 50 million. I don't know what the number is, but it's in the millions. So I get the privilege to serve 51 counties with 38 of them with less than 10,000, with 3 of them equal in population base. So they're my urbans, Angelo, North Abilene, and Lubbock. That population base is almost equal to my other 48 counties. So as I make public policy, I have to make policy for all of mine. So in a county that needs a new ambulance, that 1 cent gets them $20,000, and they're going to have to cost to get the election to have that 1 penny is $5,000 to $10,000. It's not good policy. And so I did exclude those guys for that reason. It's not consistent with where I think on some level we should do, but as a practical matter, if you ask those little bitty county budgets to go to the voters for a vote for 1 penny and they spend $10,000 on it to get, at some point the voters decide that they don't want to live in the county anymore and they move on. But that policy doesn't fit them. So I don't want to ever leave here without full disclosure. But that's
You
where
got hammered for that.
I got hammered for that one. I would just hope that people understand we're a big state. My district with 51 counties is 48,000 square miles. To put that in context, it's bigger than 20 states. I found out recently it's 107 countries. It's bigger than 107 countries. So it's massive. And it's mainly little rural counties and towns. And then the other argument is some of them are very property rich, but it's based on oil and gas. I had one county that had a $500 million decrease in appraised values overnight. So to cap them would basically be to effectively, and you would say, well, they have to because the revenue's down. Well, it's that argument that all they've got is one sheriff, one county judge. It's not like they're spending money foolishly. So there is a place for practical applications of some of that. I'll get beat up for it, but I have to do what's best for my district, and unfortunately my district's not homogenized into 200,000 people. And I'm glad it's not. I love my district. Yes, sir.
Senator, I sense a tax revolt on the horizon. After comments after what you said, and also, is there anything that you'd like to tell us about school funding? Maybe flat method to figure out how to fund schools. A simple method. Yeah,
I mean, how much time? I've just got to be back in Lubbock by noon tomorrow. Okay, I did see cake. Let me introduce Laura Lustu, by the way. For those that didn't know it, Pam Dutton retired out, but Laura's right. Go to, She's a familiar face in town, she's high energy, she's super, super smart, she really keeps me from doing stupid things. So, she's an asset. So, school finance. So, school finance is the biggest thing we fund. And it's extremely complicated. And I being a young representative back in 2011, I was going to set the world on fire, and I'm going to solve school finance. We're going to make it simple. We're going to get rid of this complication stuff. We're going to just do it straight up, right? So, here's the deal. The formula is complicated because our kids are complicated. We got 5.5 million kids, over 100 different languages. In Harris County alone, they'll speak over 100 different languages in their school system.
Oh, my goodness.
That's why we need a national language.
Now that's a different discussion, but yes, I agree, we need to have a naturalization and assimilation course and bring people back to what we're doing. But that said, the rules of the day,
Melting pot.
5.5 million kids is bigger than the population of Colorado.
Is there extra expense for teachers to teach those kids?
They get extra money for that. So, and some of that's federal, most of it's state or local. So we spend about $40 billion at the state level, and then you add another roughly $26 billion at the local level. Now, not all of our, we spend $60 billion, 20 of that goes to grants and outside the formula. The formula is reflective of the kids we teach. In that formula will be disabled, will be challenged, will be the autistic kids, will be the speak English as a second language kids, will be the kids that take career tech classes because it's more expensive to run a drill than to read a book. So we have figured out a way to effectively incentivize that difference population in every school district. And so we go out of our way to give the district the source of resources by weighting them. My accountant and me said, let's take the total pool of money, divide it by the number of kids, and say, that's your money. Well, the state of Texas went through multiple years of Supreme Court cases that said that won't work. That the geography or the zip code of your kid will not determine the quality of the education you have, and funding is a part of that. So we lost that battle many, many times over the years. So our formulas came about that way. So we are a property tax-based system. I hear all the time, let's go to consumption taxes. I've done the math. The math doesn't work. In order to move our public school finance system to a consumption tax, namely sales tax, there are other consumables, but the biggest general fund revenue we have in the state is sales tax. If we were to eliminate the local portion of school taxes for maintenance and operation, it would take another 12 cents. So we'd be 18 and a quarter. We'd be instantly non-competitive in the retail world because every state around us is less than that. Plus it'd be very regressive. You just added 12 cents to every purchase of anybody that's taxable. So if you eliminate the exemptions, most people don't realize it, your utilities, your energy, your food, your medical are all subsidized by being, quote, exempted from sales tax. If you got rid of all the exemptions, it's still 5 cents, meaning we'd be 11 and a quarter as a state, and plus 2 points for the locals. So there's no way you can take us to a consumption-only system. So I say, as an honest assessment of the numbers, property tax is the place we're going to be. So we need to get property tax reform. If that's our funding mechanism, there's not a whole lot of other options, guys. You know, you've got state income tax, you've got other things. So from the revenue side, we're kind of tapped on our only real options to handle a roughly $60 billion a year challenge on the state and local level. It's over $100 billion in the public school system on a 2-year cycle. You ought to be able to get it done. So we got to get better at what we're doing. I think the challenge with education is not the funding. The challenge is education, what do kids need to know. What do they need to be successful in the future? The challenges of public education is the broken homes, the lack of parenting. Testing is a problem. But we don't know what test there is. I mean, I you know, it's funny to me, I talk to kids who've taken the STAR test now 3 years. It's just another test, they're fine. The teachers and the parents stress out on it. We did go to an A through F ranking. School districts hate it. Starting this fall, you'll have an A through F system that says your district's an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. That is a game changer. Because we moved away from that, and we all grew up under that. We knew what A was, we knew what D was, we knew what F was. We didn't know what needs improvement or met requirements was. So the transparency that brings out will hopefully break some of the apathy from the parents that feel disengaged because they don't know what to ask. They don't want to be the stupid looking one. So now that if they get a D on that campus, they're going to be able to go and say, I understand what a D is. What are we going to do to fix this? So it will hopefully re-engage the parental discussion that we all recognize is lacking and hopefully get the parent back involved with parent kids. So we've done some things, but I wish I had the magic bullet for school formula funding. If we're going to be on property taxes, the diversity of the property values creates all kinds of havoc to try to deal with. We did it through Robin Hood. We've currently got a commission ongoing that's studying better ways to fund. One thing I think that we can come out with next session is possibly getting rid of Robin Hood. And that would be a good thing. Or at least begin the process of unwinding Robin Hood. Public policies matter. Back in the 90s when Robin Hood was put in place under the current funding mechanism, we took money, generally speaking, with the exception of Travis County, we took money from West Texas and gave it to Austin to give back out to other schools. I was told, Seminole used to be in my district, the Seminole School District Superintendent told me $300 million over the last 30 years has left that community. Think about what we would have in West Texas if that money had stayed in the community. So I do believe that for the first time in my tenure down there is an effort to figure out how do we, if we can't change the basic system, how do we get the Robin Hood component out of it? And that would be a huge plus. One more question, and I'll let you go.
I don't pretend to be a smart person, but I have heard so many people comment, why are we spending all this money on our schools when they're not teaching our kids anything? Our kids get out of high school and they can't, if you give them $1 and you spend 57 cents, they can't count your change back. They don't know. They have to look at it on the cash register to be able to give you your change. They can't count. They can't spell.
Because they didn't have that far to come in the grocery store and teach them how to count change.
Yeah. So people get disgusted spending all this money on education when they're not teaching our kids basic things to get along in the real world.
Right.
Like football.
Don't get me started on athletics. I don't know how to answer that because anecdotally, I hear those concerns and I see it. Kids don't have that fraction and just simple math. But they can tell you the inner workings of a digital machine and what it takes to program it to have that robot perform functions that will actually put them out of the job tomorrow. So it's a different level of learning. I don't know how to explain it to you. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't think it's pervasive. I think that you have that demographic or that population base that's just going to have those issues because they just don't care. They got to be somewhere. And the state said you got to be there till you're 18. And they're hanging out. They're not going to learn nothing. They don't matter what you teach or how you teach them. They're not interested. And unfortunately, we've took the disciplinary actions out of the school system. We've tied our district's hands. We've tied our district's hands by not supporting them in lawsuits. And their biggest fear is litigation. Because the school board looks at a budget and says, if we have $1 million lawsuit, or if we can just sweep it under the rug and pander to the parent and the kid, we'll be that $1 million better. So the state has a role, and out of this commission, we need to decide where that state role is on discipline and giving that back to the classroom and the teacher without fear of litigation being made to stop. So I answered that in a long roundabout way. we don't teach some of the basics to the kids that you are hearing and seeing in the public because those kids aren't going to learn. They're just not going to do it. And in the old days, we put them out to work. We found a place. There's no reason a kid is 16 or 17, if he's ready to go to work, he's working for dad at the business, been there since he was this high, we're going to make him stay 2 more years for what? So the state can get another. I mean, it's time to have some honest discussions about what do we need from our kids. But I can tell you, my kids, when I go and talk to them in classes, for the most part, and I do as much as I can, I haven't done it recently, but I try to get around to my school, university staff. And when you have debate and dialogue, those kids are pretty sharp on a lot of things. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think it's the kids that when we were kids, they just kind of checked out and nobody knew they were gone. Now they can't check out. So we need to revisit that.
My great nephew would not do his spelling lesson. There was no need to spell. His mother's a teacher, and she said, "Well, Trey, you've got to learn to spell." He said, "No, I'll always have spell check."
That's right.
On my computer. She said, "Yes, Trey, but somebody's got to know how to spell to put the words in the spell check."
Yeah.
Spell check and-
But that there is the mentality. Why learn something that I have instant access to?
I don't need to.
Bro,
I was gonna say, we have a grandchild who lives up in Seymour, Texas. He can't write. He can't sign his name. He was not taught to write cursive. Another thing, he got a letter, a handwritten letter from his grandmother. He couldn't read it. He handed it to his mother and says, "What is this?"
cursive writing
That
is
is
gone.
pathetic. That is
See,
pathetic.
but things are changing. Somebody told me you're gonna have to change with it to stay in business. I said, no, I don't. I can sell or leave. I'm not making the transition. I'm not ready for the new one. But I was looking at I had a meeting this morning with my employees. Needed to have a discussion. And I looked around that room and all those 30-somethings or younger, guess what? They're doing a pretty good job. They just do it their way. So, we figured it out. But our public school system has been handed an untenable task of social welfare, psychology, counseling, mentoring, leadership, parenting, and if they can, at the end of the day, please teach them basic math and algebra. And we've got to revisit that.
Take that a step further. The mother of that child, it took him out of school in his home school.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's just.
Well, I think cursive writing and statistics back me up. It was a mind thing. It trained your mind to think differently when you were doing cursive. So are the kids getting that in a different way now? Time will tell. But I worry about those people that were never going to be more than a $12 or $15 an hour employee when they grew up. Because those jobs are not going to be there anymore. So somewhere in this process, we need to have an honest debate. What does their future look like? Because the McDonald's, the kiosks, it's already here.
Yeah.
Things that we used to depend on to have that lower wage label as a starting place or as a support system for college kids and things, those aren't. But more importantly, there is a segment of our population that was their viable, that was their livelihood. And if we don't start talking in terms of what does the new economy look like that can offer those people a viable income to have a legitimate job, I can tell you it's service. You're a plumber or any of those trades, but people don't want to work anymore. So we have some challenges coming up. It's good, but we need to have an honest discussion in education.
They have to be taught to work.
They have to be taught to work. Let me rephrase it. Let me say it this way. They have to see work. I saw my parents get up and go to work every day. There has to be an example. There has to be an expectation.
They have to be taught to work.
They need to be taught to work by example. Our churches, our communities, our individuals, us in this room are the only hope to return back to what we know is right. Faith, family, and values. And if we as individuals choose to delegate that responsibility off to the government and choose to write our check, then don't gripe about the taxes. There'll never be enough money. But don't gripe, because it lays at the foot of our feet while we're not dealing with the problems that our kids are having and our school teachers. And nobody supports your teachers anymore. The kids always right.
everything's going down.
I gotta get out of here. I get the opportunity to probably meet one of those fine people in those state police cars before I get home tonight. They're great people. A lot of good things happen in Texas. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It's groups like this that keep who we were, who we're at, what we need to get back to. It's important that you're here tonight on a Tuesday. Continue to do it. Support your teachers. Support your administration. Do that by being engaged. If you're not happy with the direction of the board, go have those conversations. And if they blow you off, or if they say, we're not, whatever, but you can't sit on the sidelines and say, they're not listening to me. I have found, this is to be the truth, when I step out on an issue, don't matter what it is, if it's pro-life or anything else, inevitably, once I've done my step out and had my conversation and my beaten, my nose is bloody and the scars are there, 25 people will stand in behind me after that and say, I'm glad you did that. I wanted to, but I didn't. You got more support out there than you realize. And if you do it with humble humility and you start on your knees, it's not in your control anyway. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here.